What I'm gonna say right now will probably piss off a lot of people. But before you dislike the video and all over the comment section, just hear me out. We all know that go woke, go broke is pretty much a universal truth at this point. And we have a ton of examples. There's BioWare, Ubisoft, and even outside of the gaming industry, we have examples like Jaguar or Gillette, big companies whose main target audience was primarily men. Just look at where they are today. But what if I told you that wokeness is not killing games? What if I told you that the main problem is actually something else entirely? The thing is that being woke is a symptom, not the disease itself. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the disease that has plagued the gaming industry for quite some time now, but before we get into that, I want to show you why wokeness alone isn't responsible for games dying. It's no secret that Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of the best games ever made, period. Just recently it became the 4th best-selling game of all time, selling around 80 million copies. But what a lot of people either don't realize or just straight up ignore is that RDR2 is also a pretty woke game. I mean, think about it. Arthur is anti-racist and pro-woman empowerment. Lenny and Charles are probably the most competent and noble members of the gang. Bill's gay Sadie Adler is a typical strong girl boss character. The gang despises the government and rich white elites. Then there are the natives who are a core part of the story. I mean, you get the idea. The game's diverse and inclusive enough to make a DEI consultant cream their pants. And RDR2 is not alone. There are other examples like Witcher 3, Ark Raiders, Baldur's Gate 3, all these massively successful games that by today's standards can be considered pretty woke. But let's just stick with the RDR2 because it offers more of a linear story and also because I'm too lazy to write a 5,000 word script. And if you want more to the point gaming content, hit the subscribe button and do all the YouTube stuff, like, comment and all that. There's also this hype feature that can really help my small channel grow, so if you deem the video worthy of it, have it up. Now here's the important part. All these woke elements in RDR2 actually worked because they were integrated into the story in a natural way. Nothing was shoehorned in just to check a box, and most importantly, the game doesn't lecture you about any of it. Unlike most of the games where it's identity first and character second, the writers at Rockstar did the exact opposite. They focused on personalities and actually making these people feel like actual human beings through nuanced character writing. That's why characters like Charles and Lenny feel like a natural part of the Vanillin gang, because the gang itself is built on the idea of outcast, people who don't normally fit into society. The core philosophy of the gang leader Dutch is that it doesn't matter where you come from, what do you look like, or what your background is, as long as you are absolutely loyal to the gang. And the game doesn't ignore the racial prejudice either, but instead tackles it in a way that's authentic to the time period the game takes place in. They don't rewrite history to make it seem like 2025. Speaking of which, let's talk about Yasuke from AC Shadows. Ubisoft literally used Yasuke's skin color just to score ESG points and nothing else. Just look at how shallow his character actually is. He literally has zero flaws. He is depicted as the best and the most talented and the most noble samurai in all of Japan, and on top of that, he's also everything sexual. And if that wasn't immersion breaking enough, everyone around him is just so normal and accepting, like Japan and Nigeria are neighboring countries. Back in the 1500s, a 7-foot-tall black brute would be pretty much an alien to the Japanese people, and they should have reacted accordingly. But the game refuses to acknowledge that, and this is a type of disingenuous bullshit that pisses people off. The funny thing is, the nonsense activists actually did a disservice to the very people they were claiming to represent, because the entire backlash surrounding Shadows exists almost entirely because of Yasuke. Then there is the LGBT representation. Red Dead 2 doesn't push it down your throat that Bill is gay either. It just suddenly hinted that he is gay, but that's it. There's more of a focus on Bill as a character and his role in the story, and that's the way it should be. There's no 5-minute campfire monologue for Bill coming out, unlike Will Byers, who held a goddamn press conference to tell his friends that he likes a DD in his bum bum. You know, when the world is coming to an end and your friends are preparing to take on the big bad, it's probably not the best time to think about your sexuality. I mean, there's a high possibility that many of them will not even make it, except for Nancy, of course, for obvious reasons. So at a crucial time like this, you should be saying your final goodbyes instead. Not to mention they had already established that Will's gay in the previous season, which was fine I guess since no one really complained about it, and that's why this scene was completely unnecessary. This here is the perfect example of knee-jerk virtue signaling, and it shows exactly why people are so exhausted and sometimes even hostile towards this sort of forced messaging. Now, I'm not saying that Rockstar hit it out of the park and got everything perfect, which brings us to Sadie Adler. Now, I like her character, but sometimes she sticks out like a sore thumb, and I think the DEI people in Rockstar definitely pushed for a Mary Sue character in the game. Her character arc felt a bit rushed, and she went straight from being a grieving widow to a gunslinging badass, and it never really sat right. Then the thing that bothered me the most was that the game constantly reinforces this revenge is bad theme. The gang keeps falling apart because Dutch lost his mind and started chasing revenge, even though he himself preached that revenge is a fool's game. Then John Marston going after Micah for revenge is what ultimately gets the Pinkertons on his tail and sets up the events in RDR1. But Sadie never faced consequences for her actions. For example, during the hot air balloon mission, she starts a full-blown shootout with the O'Driscolls, getting an innocent man killed in the process, but that's fine, I guess. Then during the hanging of Como O'Driscoll, she starts a shootout again, compromising Arthur and Dutch in the process and still gets away with it. I think this one happened before, but you get the idea. The most unbelievable part is that during the epilogue, she's shown to be working as a lone bounty hunter, and that just doesn't work in that setting, because the Wild West would eat her alive. So yeah, overall her character could have been handled in a much better way, but despite these gripes, massive props to the writers, especially Dan Houser, because at least Sadie was a decent character and not an insufferable girl boss. She's not talking down to you, lecturing you, or hijacking the story. And that's because RDR2 gets the most important thing right: the main protagonist, Arthur Morgan. In a story-driven game, the protagonist is pretty much everything, because this is the character that you're gonna spend the most amount of time with. If the main protagonist doesn't work, then the game doesn't work, and Rockstar understood that. I mean, they could have easily gone with Charles or even Sadie as a main protagonist to score some kind of points, but they didn't. They chose Arthur Morgan because they understood their core audience. They knew the gamers, no matter their background, would resonate with a straight gunslinging, wisecracking badass cowboy. They focused on his story, his internal conflict, his redemption arc, and wrote one of the best main protagonists of all time. And that's why Arthur Morgan fandom is borderline toxic. I mean, have you seen the YouTube polls? The question could be who's the most beautiful woman in the world, and people would still select Arthur Morgan. This doesn't happen by accident. This happens when you write an authentic character for the gamers and not for the Redditors.
Hello, Spez.
And that's exactly where most AAA studios fail, because they don't want to make meaningful, likable human characters anymore. They just want mouthpieces. They want to pander to a non-existent crowd just to appeal to a broader audience. And that's where the actual disease comes in. The tone-deaf executives with their DEI checklist just so IGN can give their slob a 9. There was an article last year where David Gator talked about how EA viewed the gamers. Dragon Age Maestro says EA always spoke about a hypothetical nerd cave full of die-hard RPG fans who would always show up, so you didn't have to try and appeal to them. Just think about how insane that is. To these executives, we gamers are a bunch of basement-dwelling losers who'll just buy whatever they throw at us. And this doesn't stop at EA or RPGs. The entire AAA industry shares this same mindset. And this mindset goes way back when we used to play games like GTA San Andreas or Mortal Kombat. Most of these people hated these games and blamed them for violence and how they corrupted young boys. Which is far from true, because I feel bad even after accidentally hurting the feelings of an NPC, but anyhow. When the gaming industry blew up back in the 2010s, these same people hopped on the train because there was a lot of money on the table and everyone wanted a piece of the pie. And that's also when the parasites latched on. The game journals and the DEI consultants, who had a louder and more virtuous voice. These are the people who probably never played a single game in their entire lives other than Barbie Horse Adventures. All these people who hated men and the games they liked to play, they came in to tell the devs how to make games. For a decade, the game journals have framed themselves as the moral authorities, and the DEI consultants frame themselves as the market experts to fix the games, make them safer and cleaner. These people sold the idea that the real money was in newer, broader, and more progressive audience, and the games just needed to be more inclusive. Which is fine on paper, as I've discussed just now, but what these extremist narcissists really wanted was invasion, not inclusion. Now, the promise of more money was music to the ears of the executives, so of course they allowed all these nonsense clowns to hijack the games and do whatever they wanted with them. And that's how you get soulless games like Spider-Man 2, Ghost of Yōtei, The Last of Us 2, God of War Ragnarok. All these games which either just cucked and disrespected a beloved fan-favorite male protagonist or straight up replaced one with an insufferable girl boss. And in most cases, the overall quality of the game took a hit because of this identity-first, character-second writing. Just look at Assassin's Creed, for example. Recently, I saw this interview with Roger Craig Smith, one of the most talented voice actors out there, who also voiced Ezio Auditore. Hearing him talk about all the effort and the thought process that went into bringing Ezio to life was actually really heartbreaking, because it reminded me of the high quality the older Assassin's Creed games used to have. The dialogue, the acting, the facial animations, I mean, just look at it now.
You want a meal, monster? Come and get it!
It's mind-blowing how a game from 2009 is so much better in almost every way than a core AAA game that came out in 2025. So the question is, who allowed things to get this bad? The answer is simple. The executives, the decision makers, and the studio heads. They allowed all these self-insert extremists to come into game development and ruin pretty much everything. If they had just stuck to inclusion like Rockstar did with RDR2, things would have been just fine. But once they started invading, hijacking everything and bending the games to fit their twisted worldview, well, that's when everything went to shit. Now, the fascinating thing about the gamers is that they are a very vocal audience, too vocal for their own good sometimes. They make sure that they are heard, and when they started pushing back and start buying these propaganda-filled sermons, instead of admitting that the quality went downhill or the games just sucked, the extremely brilliant leadership at these big companies started blaming the gamers instead. I mean, who does that? Just imagine going to war with your paying customer. But anyhow, this mindset has consequences which are now unfolding in real time for these people. Now let's talk about some sales number for the PS5. I would talk about the Xbox as well, but it got outsold by this thing. And I don't even know what it's called. The PS5 is still underselling the PS4 by around 2 million units at the same point in its life cycle. And in June 2025, it was reported that for the first time, the PS5 finally had more monthly active users than the PS4. I mean, it took 5 years for the PS5 to eventually have more players than the PS4, which means the players are simply not upgrading. And you know why that is? Because there's no incentive for the players to upgrade to a PS5. There's no big new shiny game that they want to play. According to reports, some of the most played games on the PlayStation 5 in 2025 are still Fortnite, Call of Duty, and GTA 5. So people are not really playing newer games. In fact, some of the top games on the PS4 in 2025 were reportedly RDR2, Star Wars Battlefront 2, and Batman Arkham Knight. Considering how there's still kind of a 50-50 split between the PS4 and PS5 user base, a huge number of players are still playing these decade-old games. And they will not buy a PS5 because it doesn't have a single game that's worth the upgrade. I'm pretty sure the executives are banking on Ghost of Yōtei to be that game that moves consoles, but it failed to even outsell its predecessor, Ghost of Tsushima. That's how important good games are. I mean, I remember back in the PS4 days, there were a lot of first-party games that I wanted to play. Now, yes, the PS4 also offered a greater technological leap, but still, there were games like Infamous Second Son, Uncharted 4, Horizon Zero Dawn, and even if we talk about the third-party games, there was Batman Arkham Knight, there was The Witcher 3, there was Rise of Tomb Raider. Like, there were a ton of reasons for the people to go out and buy a PS4 who couldn't afford a PC. But now, when the games are filled with forced messaging and identity-first writing, people just stop caring. Now, yes, you can also argue that the reason people don't upgrade or buy games is because of the pricing. And yes, pricing does matter. I'm not gonna defend the $70 price tag. It's a ridiculous amount of money to spend on a video game. But the thing is, people can overcome the price barriers when the game is good. Battlefield 6 sold around 7 million copies in 3 days at the same $70 price tag. You know why? Because it promised to deliver what the players wanted. Meanwhile, Ghost of Yōtei, a game that could have easily been one of the top sellers of 2025 and could have even moved more PS5s, didn't do any of that. Because once again, the devs went out of their way to replace Jin Sakai, a beloved fan-favorite character, to pander to a crowd that does not exist while abandoning their core audience. The thing is, selling games like Ghost of Yōtei, Whaleguard, or probably the never-coming Intergalactic is like trying to sell a makeup kit at a car dealership instead of a car, and that too at a full price. What games like RDR2 did was they sold you an amazing car and added a small makeup kit in the glove box. You might not even notice it, but if you do, you can toss it out. But hey, if you're a woman, well, you got yourself a very nice deal. But the point is, the car is still badass and the dudes would wanna buy it. The big AAA gaming companies need to come to terms with the fact that a vast majority of their audience is just normal dudes who wanna play as badass dudes. That's the core market and it always has been. The Fruity Pebbles and the women make up around maybe 10 or 20% of that, so the games should be made with that reality in mind. 7 out of 10 games starring a badass dude and 3 games starring a hot female protagonist, and that's how it pretty much used to be back in the day. Most games allowed you to play as a simple badass dude, and then you'd get a game like Tomb Raider or Horizon Zero Dawn where you played as a hot badass chick and it felt like a breath of fresh air. Things were perfectly balanced that way, but recently that ratio has been flipped, with 9 out of 10 games either starring an uglified female lead or a gender-fluid monstrosity not for the story, but because the executives are trying to chase optics. The good news is the people are sick and tired of this, and are simply moving towards either Eastern games, AA games, or indie games. The point is simple. All this corporate nonsense and leftist extremism is the real disease. This stuff has no place in game development, and the indie games have already proven that. But yeah, that's my take. You can tear it apart or bag it up. Either way, let's hear it in the comments down below. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And again, if you think the video is worth it, hype it up so my small channel can get more exposure. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.